I invite you to investigate with me a mystery that has spanned approximately 4 centuries, the lost mission of Kenté. We find mention of a French mission near Cayuga villages in old texts and missionary letters. However, the exact location remains unknown. It is likely that the lost mission of Kenté remains concealed somewhere in Prince Edward County, Ontario, Canada, near today's Bay of Quinte on the north shore of Lake Ontario. The mission operated for 12 years, from 1668 to 1680. The 17th century was a period of trade and exploration for the Europeans, especially the French, who had traveled to the Great Lakes region. Fur traders and missionaries encountered many different groups of Aboriginals who already lived in that area. One of these nations was the Cayuga people. A member of the Iroquois Confederacy, the Cayugas lived south of Lake Ontario in what is now the state of New York. By 1666, groups of Cayugas had settled in the area we now call Prince Edward County. It is likely that one of the reasons for the movement of the Cayugas towards the north was a conflict with the Andastes, another Iroquois-speaking nation that no longer exists today. In 1666, the Cayuga people sent emissaries to Montreal to request that missionaries be sent back with them. While this may sound improbable, some scholars believe that the Cayuga people sought peace with the French, and they viewed the missionaries as a guarantee of security. The request was granted, and in 1668, 2 French Sulpician missionaries traveled back with the Cayugas to commence the Kenté mission. The Sulpician missionaries belonged to a division of the Catholic Church which was less prominent than the well-known Jesuits. In fact, there was often competition between the Jesuits and the Sulpicians. Kenté was a vital part of this competition. 2 of the primary missionaries at Kenté were Claude Trouvé and François-Saturnin Lascaris. Trouvé and Fenelon arrived in New France only a few years prior. They were soon joined by other Sulpicians and explorers who sojourned at the mission, such as François-Saturnin Lascaris. It is conceivable that Kenté was one stop along a water route which traversed the north shore of Lake Ontario. Stopping at Kenté would have been logical for travelers going from Fort Frontenac to Niagara. In fact, some scholars believe that the Kenté mission included 5 distinct posts which stretched from the Bay of Quinte to the Humber River near present-day Toronto. It was recorded that there were multiple First Nations villages on the north shore of the lake. Kenté missionaries often traveled between the indigenous villages, much to the displeasure of their superiors, who preferred fixed missionary settlements. A letter written by Trouvé describes the Cayuga people in surrounding villages. Generous hosts, he writes, who care for their French guests with gifts of food. Cayuga village residents search frantically for Durfé when he becomes disoriented in the woods. The chief of the Cayugas in that village was called Rosario by the missionaries. The inclusion of his name in the text is significant. It is extremely rare for a European text from that period to describe an Aboriginal personally and to include his name. While the Cayugas had already established some type of village, Trouvé and Fenelon were faced with the daunting task of constructing their own shelter when they arrived at Kenté in the winter. Transporting construction materials was not common in that time period, yet the ambitions for Kenté were grand. Construction materials were brought to the mission from Montreal. Farm animals and farm laborers were also sent to the mission, so it is likely that agricultural activities were attempted on site. The French superiors originally intended for Kenté to be a centralized farming community that would attract Aboriginal settlement nearby. However, this strategy was not successful. Some say the area did not have sufficient arable land and the mission became unsustainable. Others say there were political and managerial disagreements between the Kenté supporters in Montreal and Paris. What is certain is that the Cayuga people did not settle permanently in the Quinte region. In the early 1670s, the conflict that displaced the Cayugas had finished, and many returned to the south shore of the lake. The mission also had financial difficulties. One of the main financial supporters of the mission, Alexandre de Bretonvilliers, died in 1676. The Kenté mission was abandoned in 1680, largely due to high costs and the relocation of the Cayuga people.